it's the weekend, and that means there are movies out there. And we go over to Michael Snyder's out on the left coast of America to tell us what to see and what not to see. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Alex, and we've got a handful of movies to review for this weekend. I believe it's a holiday weekend where most people are, but not much of a holiday when it comes to celebrating great filmmaking. But we do have a couple of choices and a couple of blockbusters, so let's get right to it. With Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales. Yeah, Johnny Depp's Captain Jack character is back, leading the Disney blockbuster franchise to another sequel, somehow. I guess this is the fifth of these movies. And herein, he does have a few secret weapons. Well, they're not so secret. Javier Bardem and Jeffrey Rush are in the cast, and I love these guys. Unfortunately, this movie, again, the fifth in a franchise based on a Disneyland ride, is a victim of the law of diminishing returns, and I guess the audience is also the victim here. To be fair, I thought this was one of the better installments in the series, but the bar is set pretty low after the first of these films, which was a surprise and actually totally entertaining. I mean, at the beginning, Johnny Depp's drunken, diffident Captain Jack character was pretty hilarious. His inadvertent survival against his foes, whether they were real or supernatural, like stumbling to success in sword fights and ocean squalls, or even against like sorcerous enemies. It had this classic silent film slapstick charm, kind of like Jackie Chan in the Drunken Master movies, which were amazing and amusing. But I think Captain Jack has worn out his welcome. It's like Depp is increasingly on autopilot in the series, like he's navigating without a sextant. There you go. Nautical. Anyway, this time out, he's almost an afterthought, since the thrust of the movie is a young man's attempt to save his father, and his father happens to be Orlando Bloom's swashbuckling Will Turner, a character from early episodes of the series. Dad is apparently suffering the doom of eternally piloting the Flying Dutchman ghost ship, and so to save him, the son needs to find a mystical relic, Neptune's trident. So he hooks up with a learned and lovely young woman who is, of course, since she's smart, and these are olden days, she's accused of being a witch, can't have any smart women, and also with Captain Jack on a yo-ho-ho treasure hunt to find the thing before more nefarious types do. And those nefarious types include Bardem's ghostly villain, Salazar, who wants to be brought back to life, and Jeffrey Rush's Captain Barbossa, who's a more nuanced antagonist, also from earlier in the series. Both of these veteran actors deliver. And the young leads, Brenton Thwaites and Kaya Scodelario, yeah, kind of a tongue twister, they're likable. And a few of the big set pieces, the CGI work and the practical work, are pretty phenomenal. But perhaps there are too many. More properly, there have been 4 too many of these films, and the movie has an ending that could wrap up the series in a nice little bow, and then an end credit sequence, like a Marvel movie, hints that we're not done with Captain Jack yet. They're Disney property, and lately the only Depp-starred vehicles that earn big box office, so I doubt if they want to give up the ghost, if you will. I wouldn't mind if the series sunk, never to be dredged up again. But, Pirates of the Caribbean, built-in audience, people are going to go see it. I never watched or cared to watch the original and seemingly ridiculous TV series Baywatch, which was a phenomenon of the 1990s. I think it kicked off in '89 and ran most of the decade, and there were sequels. I mean, international markets loved Baywatch, dubbed, subtitled, whatever, and turned David Hasselhoff into a star in Germany. Anyway, also Pamela Anderson was in these series. I mean, I don't know. They were crime-fighting lifeguards in an idealized sunny California. But considering camp and nostalgia and a guy who has continued to be a great box office in the lead, they went ahead to make a supposed action comedy based on the show, starring Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. He plays lifeguard Mitch Buchanan, formerly the province of Hasselhoff, who uncovers a criminal plot that threatens the future of the Bay. Yeah. Well, anyway, you've got Zac Efron, Priyanka Chopra, Alexandra Daddario, a couple of appropriate cameos, but man, is this unfunny and feeble. Gasp at the lowbrow jokes as the Baywatch gang, including a few hotties that seem like Hooters waitresses in red one-piece bathing suits, seek new recruits, including a disgraced alcoholic Olympic swimming champ played by Efron, and a tubby Czech nerd who clearly needs an inner tube or a life jacket in the kiddie pool. Then you can shudder at the stupid as Mitch and his crew go after another hottie. This one is the sneering, designer-clothed real estate magnate, drug dealer, and all-round villainous, played by Chopra. I mean, Johnson does his usual shtick without any of the charm he sometimes displays in other movies he makes. How shall I put this? Here, the rock does not roll. I mean, the movie is stuck between a rock and a dumb place. Okay, Baywatch, don't watch. You can watch War Machine on Netflix, or you can go to a movie theater and see it, and it's actually a pretty decent film, a satire about the war in Afghanistan and American military involvement there, based on a book called The Operator, The Wild and Terrifying Inside Story of America's War in Afghanistan by a guy named Michael Hastings. The director and writer of the script, David Michaud, does a pretty solid job, and it basically focuses on this swaggering general played by Brad Pitt and all the people around him. Ben Kingsley's on board as Karzai. Anthony Michael Hall, who's like a big hulking fellow these days, plays the general's second. Topher Grace is a PR guy brought in by the military to kind of make everybody look good. It's a pretty solid cast all the way down the line. You see all the civilian weasels from the U.S. government who are trying to pull the troops back while at the same time win the hearts and minds of the Afghanis against the Taliban. It's fun for about half the movie, and then it sort of bogs down a little bit. But, you know, it's a sharp film, and it's an anti-war movie that shows the kind of ridiculousness of these varying approaches to modern warfare. And I got to tell you, Brad Pitt is oftentimes at his best playing a character like this guy who is very full of himself and a man's man, and at the same time relentlessly silly when you look at it. I thought War Machine was worth checking out, but again, it does tend to bog down a little bit. And it's not anywhere near as funny as it wants to be or it should be. The big surprise this weekend is a movie that I don't know is going to make it to a lot of different markets this weekend, but I thought it was rather good. Berlin Syndrome. We've heard of the phrase Stockholm Syndrome, where someone who's a captive becomes enamored of their captor. Well, this movie is sort of about the obsession that a guy has for women, or a woman in particular. And the woman is a young woman played by the Aussie actress, and I think she's really pretty great in this film. Maybe this is the best thing she's ever done. Teresa Palmer. She's played like teenagers here in the States. She's been in a lot of kind of American kind of comedies, youth-oriented stuff, and she's growing up. And in this film, she plays an Australian photographer who is taking, you know, your basic summer abroad type visit. She's left Australia behind on her own, and she's in Berlin taking photographs and scoping out the place when she meets this guy named Andy, who is a local guy, a German, who was an English teacher in a local school, and they connect. Unfortunately, he has kind of long-range plans for her, and it gets creepier and creepier. This is the sort of thriller that sneaks up on you and is like totally sharp, and eventually grabs you by the throat and doesn't let go. And Palmer is just great. And I have to say, this German actress, Max Riemelt, who plays Andy, the guy who hits on her and eventually becomes a little more dangerous than she could have ever imagined, he's incredibly creepy. And Berlin is such a big, sprawling city and has all these little alleyways and you know, bombed out buildings that still haven't been reconstructed since reunification, that you could imagine you could kind of get lost there. This is this had echoes of The Collector. I don't know if you remember The Collector, but that was a fantastic movie starring Terrence Stamp and Samantha Eggar about a guy that basically kidnaps this woman and keeps her under lock and key because he's enamored of her. Yeah, there's a lot of that going on here. I thought Berlin Syndrome was fantastic. I think a woman named Kate Shortland directed it. The director, written by Sean Grant. High marks to Berlin Syndrome. I was very, very impressed. Let's wrap things up with Long Strange Trip, which is a massive documentary about, of all things, the Grateful Dead. Love 'em or hate 'em, the quintessential jam band has thousands upon thousands, maybe millions of fans. And it's it's been an amazing tale of their development into basically an industry from their kind of modest psychedelic origins in the 60s as one of the big San Francisco rock bands, progressive and otherwise, with fantastic improvisational skills. Now, this movie is also going to be available on Amazon, but it seems like the kind of thing that you might want to see in the theater with good sound if you are a fan of the band. Directed by Amir Barlev. I was pretty impressed by it, but it is 239 minutes long with an intermission. So I think you've got to like the Grateful Dead or totally be interested in this story. But this is impressive and prodigious stuff. And despite the length and the copious detail, there were some holes in the tale. I was like I'm not telling tales out of school here. I was a pop music critic at the San Francisco Chronicle, and so I noticed a lot of the things that I felt were missing. But this is an impressive saga with guitarist Jerry Garcia and his fellow guitarist and singer Bob Weir as the frontmen of a band that also featured incredibly talented musicians, Bill Kreutzmann among them, on drums, Phil Lesh on bass, and all I can tell you is that despite the fact that I'm not a giant fan, I was riveted by this thing. I was never bored. And this is, a saga that will definitely be of interest to their fans and curious people with a love of adventurous music and the patience to watch this for such a length of time. Anyway, I thought it was, put it that way. By the way, executive produced by Martin Scorsese.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Good.
How about you? What do you got? Anything going on?
Just on Hulu, there's a very interesting, it's not a documentary, it's kind of a documentary, but it's got actors playing the parts while the story is being told by the lead person in the piece, and it is called Becoming Bond. And it is the life story of all people, George Lazenby. And Wow. It is fascinating. It's fascinating because he had a fascinating life before he became Bond, and when he became Bond, why he only did one picture and then gave the whole thing up. And I found it fascinating. I stayed riveted to it throughout the whole thing. It's only about an hour and a half, but it is about somebody who you probably just never paid much attention to. Yeah.
Wow, I've always wondered about the guy and why he just basically dropped out after doing Her Majesty's Secret Service, his one Bond film.
Yeah, and he was offered a lot of money. He was offered a contract to do 6 more, and he turned it down. He just decided, I don't want to be Bond anymore. I don't want this.
Wow.
Yeah.
One and done. I always thought that was odd, but in any event, that's about it, I guess. So. We should probably tell folks that they can check in with me on Twitter at Culture Blaster and on Facebook at Michael Snyder's Culture Blast page, where we've archived our little segments here. Alex is on GABNet and other stuff.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. And for the rest of you, there's more GABNet coming right up.